into armhole for a dropped shoulder sweater feels like an easy task. The top edge of sleeve is straight, the armhole is straight too. All you need is to measure your armhole, mark this with a few stitch markers, position your sleeve and seam. Nice and easy, especially if everything goes well and all your measurements are specified in the pattern. But what to do if something goes wrong? For example, your gauge is different and your sleeve is turned out slightly wider or a bit narrower than specified in the pattern. What measurements to use? How to attach your sleeve? Should you rip it back? No, of course not. And today I'm going to show you how to seam a sleeve for a dropped shoulder sweater despite on any measurements and any numbers. So let's start. Here I have my sweater parts. The shoulder seams are already seamed. I already got a neckband. Here are my two sleeves. In ideal situation, I would block all my parts before seaming, but as most knitters wouldn't want doing the blocking twice, I decided to ignore this step this time and to assemble my sweater as it is with all its rolled edges without any improvement. So, how to find the correct position for your sleeve in your armhole? First of all, you need to measure the edge of the finished sleeve and find the middle. You can measure this with your tape measure, find the number and divide this by 2 and place marker in the middle. Or you can simply fold your sleeve and here in the middle place stitch marker. Now you need to place your sleeve into armhole. First of all, you need match the middle of your sleeve with shoulder seam. Then you can easily find the position of your armhole, just placing your sleeve along the edge of your front or back part. And join with the marker. Now you can measure the length of armhole on your front part, or instead you can count how many rows you've got from shoulder seam up to the marker. I've got 27 centimeters and I will find the same length on my back, 27 centimeters. And place another marker here. Or you can join your sleeve with this point. Now I will double check if those two markers are at the same position. Looks the same, but as I mentioned, you can count your rows. So next step, you need to place more stitch markers between first marker and the marker in the middle of your sleeve. For this purpose, I'm going to use split markers. So I try to divide this distance into two equal parts. Place marker. Then I'm going to divide this smaller distance again. Place another marker. And repeat this again. And again. The more markers you placed, the more evenly you spread your stitches and more beautifully you attach your sleeve. I will do the first part of sleeve first, and then I will repeat the same procedure for the second part. I'm going to seam my sleeve using the mattress stitch. My sweater is knitted with two yarns. One is silk mohair and cotton yarn in shape of tape. Actually it's tape yarn, but I think I will use just one strand of cotton yarn. I'm not going to use mohair yarn to attach my sleeve. So I'm going to use just one strand of cotton tape yarn to seam my sleeve. I cut pretty long piece of yarn so I can seam the whole sleeve. I use my tapestry needle with slightly bended end. It's pretty big. So I thread my yarn. Let's rotate our knitting so it's more convenient to seam. And I start from the lower edge of armhole. Let's do it slightly bigger. I remove first marker and pull my yarn through, and I pull my needle through the first stitch. I'm going to leave long end of yarn, which I'm going to hide later. So I pick up yarn loops along the edge of the armhole and stitches along edge of my sleeve. Normally I pick up loops between my edge stitch and first stitch of front or back part and first row of the sleeve. I sew up to first marker and then remove it. This marker dropped. I will place it back so everything is fixed. Make sure you are not over tighten your seam. For some yarns you might need to pick up loops inside of the first stitch after the edge stitch or even after the first stitch. It all depends from the condition of your fabric along the edge, because sometimes edge stitches could be overstretched. In ideal situation you need to pick up stitches after the edge stitch. Now I reached my second marker, I remove it and continue. Another marker just gone. You can pick up both loops of stitches along the edge of sleeve, but I do prefer making this like one strand after another, so the seam is nicer and more flat. I'm wondering if you prefer seamed or seamless sweaters and cardigans. Let me know in the comments below. Personally, I don't mind seaming, so I knit seamed garments more often rather than seamless. I love knitting seamless garments for my kids, because in this case you can adjust the length of sweaters or cardigans a bit later as they grow. sometimes you need to reposition your marker. Here I've got a bit bigger stitch because it's transition from one bind off row to another. So in this case I will pick up one loop of the edge of previous row, and then I will pick up one loop of the next stitch of the next row. So it will close the gap. But first I need to pick up one loop of the front. So here we go, one loop of one stitch and one loop of another stitch. So it's closing everything nicely. Here is my last bind off row, so here some kind of knot and not very smooth edge. So I'm going to use the same technique to join two rows together. So using so here my last stitch of previous row, I will pick up one loop of this stitch, and as my next step I'm going to pick up the second loop of this stitch and the first loop of the stitch of next row. I will move this piece of yarn to the wrong side and continue. So you can see the gap is closed again. You might need to tighten your yarn a bit. Make sure you're not over tight it. So here I reached the middle of the sleeve and the shoulder seam, and I need to make sure that I don't have any wrinkles here, not over tighten anything. I will make one stitch straight into the seam. So now I'm going to remove the middle marker and join the sleeve and second part of armhole the same way with the markers. So I'm looking for the middle of this length. Join two parts together. Now I'm going to split this length into two parts. Place the marker in the middle And repeat this step again. Remember, the more markers you place, the prettier the seam, the more evenly you can spread the stitches along the edge. So you can see the result here. No wrinkles, no overstretching, and the blocking will make the seam even flatter. So here I'm ready to continue the second part of the sleeve. I continue absolutely the same way. Here just few stitches left to complete. And the last one. So here I fully seamed one sleeve into armhole. This is how the seam looks like. So next step, I'm going to attach my second sleeve. Then I'm going to close sleeve seams and edge seams. And then I'm going to block my sweater. And my very last step would be to hide all those yarn ends after blocking.